Hello everybody, welcome to another program, B for Belarus on Primus. This is Yaroslav Romanchuk and we're here with Baranich. Vlad, hello.
Hello, we're burning.
You're right, Vladimir Baranich is a country consultant and media analyst, and today the major theme of the program is Belarusian security in the modern world, the most effective ways to ensure it. Of course, the information event was the security conference in Minsk, where Lukashenko made a lot of statements about security, about the role of Belarus in the modern world, how Belarus would be grateful and pleased to welcome anybody who thinks about peace, not about ambitions, militarization and stuff like that. But to begin with, let's start with a very basic question for our listeners worldwide. Is Belarus secure enough for ordinary people?
Yes, it is. I mean, secure in terms of what? No war. Yes, it's secure. No daylight robberies on streets. Yes, we have how many? Well, 100,000 policemen.
They say that there's 200,000. We are the most policed country in the world.
Efficiently, even more police state than somewhere in Latin America, or they maybe like OCP in RoboCop. So in this aspect, as for the physical security, yes, people are secure enough here, and everybody, foreigners coming here, it's probably one of the, I wouldn't say one of the most secure countries in the world. There are better, maybe more comfortable countries, but in this respect, yes.
That's right. So essentially, when you talk about personal security and safety in the streets, wherever you go, it's pretty okay, stable, and there is no need to draw much attention to that. Though we do not have private security agencies, everything is monopolized by Ministry of Interior, and if you want to buy additional security for your apartment or for your business, you should go to a company that is has a license from Ministry of Interior, right?
Yes, that's the point, that no private security agencies. Well, there are some, the guards in shops and etc., but they don't have private investigators, or at least those agencies who can carry arms. Those are in business. They can only have these traumatic weapons. That's it.
Right. So why do you think Lukashenko and Minister of Foreign Affairs held a conference like this in Belarus? Because the major theme was the world is at the brink. One more step and it will be another collapse with horrific consequences for the whole world. And Belarus claims to have a special role in the world. Is it due to special relations with Putin and the Kremlin? Is it due to our history? Or is it something inside our policies that make Belarus a suitable platform for a dialogue between warring and hating each other nations and countries?
Well, this question is simple and tough at the same time. You mentioned Kremlin. Yes, I think one of the reasons is that the main recipient of this message is the Kremlin, because Lukashenko now tries to get support for his sixth term and going to 30 years in power. And so without Kremlin, without direct support by Kremlin and indirect support, which means support, mainly the support is financial support. He needs money.
That's right. He needs money to sustain his model, which is authoritarian, which is based on the use of police force against people, against forces, organizations that do not share his values. And, for example, according to UN research, number of policemen per 100,000 residents or citizens is 1,442, while in Russia it's almost 3 times lower.
Yes, it requires money, but not only money for this, police and law enforcement, but also to maintain, let's say, his low prices on oil and gas, which they resell to the West after that, so getting extra money. Besides that, it helps him to keep more or less well, let's say, affordable living standard, not because of he can't give people opportunity to earn enough money, but they still keep low prices on house on rents and for utilities, etc. So one of the lowest, maybe in the world, because for especially for utilities, for
that's right. You're talking about prices, but let's go back to the personal security, personal safety first. According to the social index published in 2019, Belarusian personal safety is ranked 58th, while Poland, which has democracy, has much more engagement of the people, is 20th. Lithuania 46th. Then we have Sweden 44th, right? Now we have Ireland, which I love this country very much, is 17th. And as for this wonderful, very important safety parameter, homicide rate, deaths per 100,000 people, Belarus ranks 78th. So that's not that rosy. We have a lot of police, we have a lot of intelligence and surveillance of the people, but we could not say that we are so tolerant and we hospitable and essentially we're not aggressive, because this kind of ranking shows that there is a lot of aggression inside Belarusians.
Well, it's one of the myths that people are not aggressive. People are very aggressive here, especially taking into account those in low social stratums. Like, workers, builders, they drunk, and that's drunkenness.
They drink, they swear.
Villages, yes. If you take a public transportation, going to, just take a commute train, which is called electrichka here. Just you can see what is come there. It's and in every such train there is a pair of special police forces like SWAT. They're OMON, they call.
That's right. Well, but at the same time, so this homicide rate is quite high, and we cannot say that we we discovered some sort of safety net in the authoritarian country to ensure this parameter. So, but look at this, another thing which tells us how good police, road police are. Traffic deaths per 100,000 people, we rank 45th in the world, 45th, which is very close to Poland, 43rd, Lithuania 47th, we're in the same group. Sweden is, number 2 in the world. Sweden knows how to drive, Swedish people know how to drive cars. Ireland, 5th in the world, which is also very impressive, but we're definitely much better than China, which is 77th.
As for driving cars, it's craziness. I left, I totally quit this driving, and I don't want to have nothing to do with that. It's just madness on streets. I mean, there are people mad on crazy in daily life, but they're on driving a car, and that's the problem here. Is that about safety? There is no respect for law. For the law, like the law from the capital letter, just no laws are being obeyed, and cooperating with police.
King is law, law is king. That's it. That's interchangeable.
Because authorities don't respect their own law, and people don't respect law because of that, and because of this criminal. I won't say criminal, but because of the history, which, Stalin's Gulag and everything, like half of the country spent in prison, another half is going to go there. So it's in general, it's like a criminal, if you live in this criminal mindset, I would say, because
which is also part of even school education system, where there's a lot of rudeness, a lot of violence, both from the position of teachers and in between children in schools. Which
bullying is just one of this terrible thing.
I think over 60% of children experience bullying in secondary school, which is atrocious.
So when I said, in the beginning, I said it's a very safe country. military, but I mean, say if you won't be robbed on street in this respect.
You don't go looking for troubles, but if you are in school or you go to a bar, the probability of you being bullied or harassed is quite high.
Well, don't go to such bad places like bars,
Bars, right? By definition, bars are not bad, right?
But I mean that, like in Minsk, of course, I'm talking about Minsk. I'm Minsk bound. I'm just, and the whole civilized life here in Belarus is concentrated in Minsk. It's like a big ghetto.
Many people in regional cities would resent your statement because they believe that their life is much better, richer, even in bars and restaurants and nightclubs. But let's look at another metrics of stability, security, and safety, which is Global Militarization Index 2018. And Belarus is in the top 5 of the most heavily militarized countries in Europe. First Armenia, then Cyprus, Russia, Greece, and Belarus. What is the justification of such heavy expenditures? Why are we so militarized? Who are we afraid of? The government.
Where is North Korea?
North Korea, Europe. I'm talking about
Europe. Okay. If Europe, Europe is. I'm surprised Armenia is in the first place.
No, Armenia because they have a lot of.
They have war with
to Azerbaijan conflict, so that's understandable.
But Belarus is in top
Cyprus
5.
Also, they have the military and the northern Cyprus problem. Yeah. Russia, it's been military.
It has always been, yes.
Greece. Understandable. And Belarus. We are higher than Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Finland, Turkey, Estonia.
Russia could be excluded since it is mostly Asia, so Belarus shifts to the 4th place in this case.
Anyway, so how does the government justify such high expenditures and militarization of its own country? What are the perceived enemies of Belarus right now? Because looking from the perspective of the most recent security conference, not a single bad word about Ukraine, not a single bad word about European Union, but a lot of not animosity, but foreboding or some anxiety and tension in the relations with Russia. So do you believe that this kind of militarization is to potentially protect us from Russian invasion, Russian influence?
Oh no! That's a sarcastic joke from yours. Yes, I understand.
Sarcastic question.
But our listeners probably don't know that.
Grasp sarcasm.
Let us explain this because they will truly believe that there is Russia. No, Belarus is it's a puppet state of Russia. It's efficiently one of their republics, so to say, and. So the Russian military feel here like at home, and it's like a western forepost of Russia here. Mm-hmm. And the reason for militarization, the reason is because current political regime in Belarus considers itself like an heir of Soviet, of USSR, mini USSR, which was heavily militarized. Stalin is good guy for them, example of this strong leader. And at the same time, remember in 97, Lukashenko said that his example is Hitler's Germany.
It was 1995, 1997.
It was 97. Okay. And
young, inexperienced political leader.
Maybe earlier,
probably.
Maybe not even 97. Maybe
in the beginning of his first term.
Yes, somewhere. But I think it was nice. That doesn't matter. But in the beginning of his career, he tried to please German journalists, and he thought that there were ideas maybe that he mixed Hitler with Bismarck, but nobody knows.
That was written.
Yes, but anyway, it was announced that Hitler's strong power is the model for Belarus,
right?
Which is
to ensure full employment, to ensure industry in full swing, and
but that's the reason you see such regimes, I would say, which are based on not on law, not on common sense, but on brutal power. They have to create this militarized environment well, just it's like for a bully, he
Yeah,
was,
that's right. So, but Belarus, from what I see, is not even Lukashenko is in power. Is not planning or is not determined to invade any neighbor.
Sure,
so it doesn't have the potential. It's not in the plan. So it's a peaceful country in terms of any fear of aggression for any neighbor, right? So why do we spend so much money and effort to militarize? Because there's another index which is called Global Peace Index, which tells us how peaceful a nation we are, and we rank in 2019 edition 97th. We are definitely much higher than Russia, which is 154th, or Ukraine 150th. But at the same time, 97th is far from being an example to follow. And in this respect, if we are so down the list of the countries in terms of peace, militarization, hospitality, to say nothing about soft power, which we'll elaborate later on, how credible is our plea and our appeal for the nations of the world to come up here and hold peace talks about security, safety, to prevent the countries from stepping further beyond the brink of this kind of fragile peace?
Well, there is other side of that. I suspect, and maybe it's my suggestion, like version of what's going on. It's just besides that desire to look cool, like these dictators, they like these uniforms, just how they feel good, having feeling a strong boy, like a bully, pretending to be the most cool in the region, for girls, and here's another reason is probably because in such regimes they're highly corrupted, and corrupted in terms of bribery, but in terms of using public money. That's how can they vindicate such a number of generals, colonels? So they have to, these soldiers have to be there because the generals have to get somebody to
salaries,
rule over, and salaries, etc.
So it's just everything.
It's just a vicious circle,
Well, a vicious circle, but essentially from the point of view of our image, from the point of view of real security and safety. If we claim that we are a peaceful nation, right? So we should set some examples in terms of the military, army, whatever, right? But we don't do that. And if you go to another matrix for evaluating our security, which is soft power, right? It consists of government, enterprise, engagement, education, digital, and culture. And again, we're definitely not in the top 50 of the world. So why doesn't the government invest its efforts and money and resources to enhance something that they really can impress the world with? But it goes on saying about rockets with Ukraine and China, with military union with Russia, at the same time pretending that it kind of has some capacity to be Helsinki 2.0.
Well, there are two sides of this question, two parts of this question, I would say. On one side, there is desire, as you said, these regimes, they always want to feel good because of they don't have economic power like Japan or like Germany, so there's military power.
Less than 0.1% of the world GDP in nominal terms, which is like we don't exist in the world economy scale.
Yes,
right?
That's correct. So having this military power makes it feel important, strong, maybe safe, because these regimes are usually afraid of being overturned and etc. On the other side, there is again this Russia close by, and they maybe maybe this is for again, Western forepost of Russia. So that's
better, whiter Russia.
It's a buffer state, like Lukashenko many times said. Trying to appease Russians and trying to appeal to their nationalistic because here I would say militarism here is kind of religion. That's why this here in Belarus and in Russia as well. It's war because
rhetoric.
there's still this
theme of war, Second World War. We save the world from fascism.
They call the Second World War. They call Great Patriotic War, and it's every anniversary. It's every year when there is a date, 9th of May, not like in the whole world, there's 8th of May, there's 9th of May, they celebrate it. It's
then
like
22nd of June, invasion of fascism in the Soviet Union, then 3rd of July, National Day. So it's like it starts in the end of April and goes on till the beginning of July. This is all about military.
That's a sheer religion, I would say, because from psychological point of view, from the sociological point of view, it's no difference from religion. These military parades, they're like those processions with the holy body, with the cross or whatever. You take any religion, they would have some relics there. They have these monuments. They're like holy icons even.
Why do we have this particular theme or topic as our kind of religion? Because there are many things: our agriculture, our forests, our lakes, our people, our talents, our scholars, engineers, business people who were active in Belarus in the beginning of the 20th century. Out of all things, they chose the military, the army, the war. Do you believe this is just a unified nation? Because recently, Minister of Foreign Affairs argues that in order to enhance not to lose the nation, the country, independence, we should speak more Belarusian. We should be promoting more Belarusian culture. So he seems to understand the importance of soft power, because no matter how strong your military is, having Russia as a neighbor with its military might, you don't have a single chance to defend your country with tanks and rockets.
It's funny for me I don't know whether those Western analysts or politicians understand this. There is no threat from Russia for Belarus. Belarus is efficiently the part of Russia. How can
from the military perspective?
No, from all perspectives. From political, it's from economical. Belarus is just a part of. And in Russia, they still call Belarus instead of country when they say, not to repeat like in general talk or in writing to avoid this repetition of words. They use a term republic, which comes from the Soviet times.
That's right.
When
still use this, right?
Yeah, still use it. And if you take any Russian analyst or politologist, they would call it republic, not because of political system, but because republic
is part of a bigger union, right?
Is part
Federation, confederation.
It's a substitute for the country.
But you would agree that right now, when we are talking about deepening of integration with Russia, when on the 8th of December there will be some documents to ratify and be signed by the presidents, still there is a lot of tension in between the leaders, the Kremlin and the official Minsk, because Lukashenko, during this particular peace conference or security conference, argued that, we shouldn't be liars to ourselves. Let's call a spade a spade. This is a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which is definitely different from the interpretation of this from the Russian perspective. So this one. Then again, the Kremlin argues that first we should deepen and pass some authority to subnational bodies, forming some sort of federation, while Belarusian authorities vehemently oppose it, saying that no, not a single drop of our sovereignty will be shared with Russia. We are an independent country.
It's also understandable. Russia wants to keep Belarus as close as possible, efficiently as the puppet state, since they pay for that. They already have paid $140 billion according to well, it's according to former Russian ambassador here.
130 billion dollars, but this is again something that is highly debatable, because if you look at the price differential, the biggest beneficiary of the existing conditions between Russia and Belarus definitely are Russian oligarchs and power groups, power lobbies, because it's not Belarusian business or Lukashenko who goes to the Kremlin and say, let's smuggle goods, let's smuggle energy,
weapons,
whatever other weapons. This is about these powerful network groups that go beyond sovereignty and nationality of Russia and Belarus, as you know, like Wagner Group, like all these military power groups that definitely benefit from the existing like gray area relations between Belarus and Russia. So when Babic and other Russians say that the former ambassador argue that Belarus benefited in the volume of $130 billion, the pure money, net money that landed in Belarus probably is about 30% of that sum. The rest went to coffers of Russian oligarchs, and that's why it's kind of we should be clear that now when Russia is talking about changing relations, it has not just business in mind, but geopolitical things and the Ukrainian factor and other factors in mind, of course, in the light of the forthcoming presidential elections in Russia 2024.
In this respect, Russian oligarchs, the main guarantors of the Belarusian sovereignty.
Yeah, exactly.
They will fight, for Belarusian independence.
The source of business, of revenues.
It's like a shadow territory where they can resell money. My classmate, my classmate, he is still good friend with Viktor But. They studied together. The
guy who is in American prison right now, right?
Yes, who was, there was a movie with Nicolas Cage about that guy. I forgot the name for this movie. It was Trading Death or something like that.
I watched that. It's a good movie.
So Viktor But, they both studied as military translators. In Russia, they have Special Institute of Military Translators, and so they were good friends. They're still in correspondence, and he sends me sometimes his emails from prison, United States. So I planned, when I was in school, I planned to also go to that institution. I mean, to that school of military translators.
You wanted to be a Soviet spy.
So no spy. They served.
Romanticism, right?
No. There was just there was the only one way that time to somehow to get over the country and to see the world. It was romanticism, yes. And but I found myself just thinking that I could be on Viktor But's place, because he was translator in Belarus, in that in Vitebsk area. There is, I know a lot about that, how he became this trade, and he was translating these negotiations when they were selling arms in Africa mostly. So he had good contacts, and he just was in business, and he just followed that. But all that trade was going through Belarus. So he began here, and he was continuing to do this through Belarus, because we have a lot of Russia can, for example, sell some let's say jets, tanks, whatever they can sell, or even S-400.
We don't know.
But Belarus can, because it's not obliged. Nobody,
But that's not a rogue state. This is not under sanctions like Iran.
Yes,
so that's surprising.
That's the great in other areas, like trading with raw materials, with oil. We know this scandal when, remember, they were several years ago, they were selling Russian Russia, they get oil for lower price, like in Russian regions they make gasoline out of it and then sell to the West. Since Russia restricted such amount of, which goes to the West, they called it
dissolvents and dilutants.
Solvents, yes.
Dissolvents and dilutants.
Yes.
I know this in the beginning, the break of the 2010s, but at the same time, we are talking about, again, security.
Yes, yes.
And so these are all commercial deals, gray or half legal or legal. We don't care about that much. But from the perspective of really getting the muscles of the country, and so the whole world learns about us in a good way, right? So what can we do to improve the soft power, to enhance it, to make it much better? For example, what can we do in culture? What we can do in education, in engagement, in enterprise? Because if you go on talking about the military, you don't impress anybody. But we talk about soft power. You have the country that are on the top of the world: United Kingdom, France, Germany, United States, Japan, Canada, and Switzerland. Then comes Sweden, little country, Netherlands, Australia, countries that impress the people not by their military might, by their tanks and rockets and whatever gray areas. They impress country by digital technologies, by education, by people's engagement, by, that some people who traveled in Australia or New Zealand told me about when they travel in different places. There was a huts where there's food, and you pay whatever you believe is important for you. So the infrastructure for the people is so good that the countries are perceived as the best countries to live in.
Well, first of all, you see, those countries are highly civilized. They are democracies.
Yeah.
What is most important, they are democracies. They don't have nasty regimes there, which monarchy-like regimes or Asian despotisms like we have here, just typical Asian despotism.
Slavic despotism, Slavic authoritarian regime.
Well, yeah, with Slavic peculiar features, but
Russia, Ukraine, look at the three countries, Slavic nations, and Russia's governance quality is very bad, and it's not a good country from the security and well-being perspective. Ukraine, though it is still a democracy, but from the point of view of a governance and rule of law, it's a very bad country, and you have very low ranking on economic freedom. Say nothing about property rights. Belarus is a kind of an example when we have commercial flows, information flows, security flows under the strict control of one family, as it were.
Sure.
But still, people are deprived, stripped of their rights and freedoms.
That's the point. I mean, economical freedoms as well, because one family keeps everything. There is nepotism, strong nepotism, and so we can see this in every level, even in private businesses where nepotism is. There are people you can get job, even those NGOs. If you go to those, then supported by I used to work for the EU magazine, which is called the European Choice. The level of nepotism there is just incredible. I mean, I could see, I don't know, because I was writing about that, and I know how they distribute these European grants, which EU, ushers through certain programs like interborder or some here, some ecological projects. There is you have to have good connections within that structures, European structures.
Right.
I mean, in this office of European Union here, just great nepotism there. If you go to UN, it's UN is a very bad example. I mean, because it may be a good example of bad example. I mean, like. everything there is very ineffective because it's again, and we talk, and those countries you mentioned, they're not libertarian countries, of course.
There's not a single libertarian country in the world.
But
no doubt about
their model is liberal model of economy. And still, at least they have this
According
freedom.
to Economic Freedom Index, there are only 5 economically free countries. Plus, you can add mostly free countries, which adds up to about 35 countries in the whole world. And of course, these countries, if you keep economic freedom for a long time, you ensure prosperity, you ensure well-being, and your safety and security levels definitely go up. At the same time, there's an interesting indicator I recently came across, which is success index. So how successful are people in the country, how successful they perceive themselves. And again, in the authoritarian countries, people tend not to call themselves successful, as it could be a challenge for the authoritarian rulers and for the whole society,
right,
which runs the policy according to the maxim, well, everybody should be equal, why you should care more than anybody else.
It's not rather equal, but more, I would say, invisible.
Unified. Right?
Unified, you
invisible.
Shall not be visible above everybody.
It's like, I like this image of in Chicago rock musical, Mr. Cellophane. You are transparent, you are invisible,
yes,
you are nobody, you can be ignored. This is kind of Belarusians in most areas are like Mr. Cellophanes. They are invisible, they can be ignored, they are nobodies, in fact.
They try to stay in shadow, not to be noticed by anybody. I remember I was talking to one of the leaders of the business associations here in Belarus, and I just offered him one program for kind of for promotion of famous good business people, and he told me, well, this was kind of business project, just like ads or video ads, and he told me, most of those business people would pay to you that not to be mentioned at all.
That's right, exactly. But again, if this is also part of the atmosphere of fear that the authorities imposed on the people, and people, they resented it and rejected it probably a couple of years after Lukashenko took over in Belarus, and now even teachers, doctors, business people, they're afraid to talk about their own problems, though they're very, very far from political life, from constitutional arrangement. But let's say when you come to them and say, well, let's talk about your problems, let's make your transaction costs, the regulatory costs, taxes lower to benefit your own production. Let's make your status in the society better. Let's make your wages higher. And they say, no, we don't want to mention your name. I don't want to even talk to you.
Yes.
So in this kind of environment, your personal security and safety is a flop. It's nothing. It's like bogus.
Oh, yes. It's another thing. Personal security in this respect, if you go into business, that's different. Business is very insecure area here, because not because of robberies, but because of police, because of they will always try to find what you're guilty with. Maybe you stole something, which is true, because nepotism, it makes people to do such bad things, especially when they distribute state money, especially those who work with state state businesses, or they do some job for the state, like this payments on streets, for example. That's another costly projects. So it's profitable for those who do them, and they're guaranteed by the state, but again, state would ask something in return.
That's right. So essentially,
like president says, well, we didn't pay state money for his palace.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, just
somebody
gave us
this generous gift.
Yeah, there was a story like this marble, which was supplied with they had marble, which I know this factory, which it is. This is
in Belarus.
It's in Belarus, and it's I think Belarus Greek joint venture.
Right.
So they make this marble stuff, all marble stuff, and we see on streets is made there.
That's right.
And they were not paid for that marble and granite which is provided to that presidential palace. I don't know, but that time there was a big scandal, but then it was just
cushioned. So let's conclude that Belarus is the country where freedom of people was sacrificed to get security and stability, and as a result we have neither security nor stability, as a well-known economist Milton Friedman argues about 40 years ago. Would you agree with that?
Well, the thing is that again, people are not being asked about it.
But they don't want even. It's like if you ask them, no, don't ask me. I am.
That's
Mr. Cellophane.
That's a vicious circle, because we don't have democracy, and we don't because people are afraid of that and feel afraid of that because we don't have democracy. Because this again, democracy. It's not only democracy, but there is a rule of law, of the law. Where law is obeyed, and when we have constitution which is trampled down, in everywhere, just in every aspect. I mean, in minor details. For example, if you take constitution and presidential decrees stay over constitution. They overrule constitution. So
That's
how
right.
can you talk about that? Again, if we talk about international laws, international laws means nothing in Belarus according to our laws. Then the law is priority below constitution.
Law of bureaucracy, law of nomenclatura, law of.
I mean, it's officially
of instructions and telephone.
In Russia, Russia is obliged to fulfill or to obey international agreements they sign. Belarus does not. I mean, in terms
it's not part of your Council of Europe, right? Exactly. So essentially, we are in the position when the authorities hold big, loud events, international conferences, talk about security, about turning Belarus into a peace platform for negotiations between big nations, warring nations, and there are many conflicts in the world. At the same time, in order to claim the status, you must do your homework, which unfortunately our authorities and our society have failed to deliver.
Since you mentioned that conference, and which, in general, attitude of Belarus claiming to be someone go-between, like Russia and the West, this position resembles me. There is a fish called the pilot fish. They come together with sharks, and they've been fed by shark because they have leftovers from sharks' meals, and they're protected.
By sharks.
Because they're nearby sharks, and sharks don't touch them. So this is very convenient. I mean, Belarus is like that pilot fish. They try to get money out of the thin air. I mean, not money, I mean resources.
Assets.
Because Belarus is in the center of Europe, so it's like a pole on the road. You have to somehow.
You cannot omit it, right?
Yes,
you have to.
Yeah, and it's just for example, if Belarus tries to scare Russia with the West, and at the same time tries to scare West with Russia, and trying to get money from both, or resources or some other benefits from those.
There's a book, How to Swim with Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. So Lukashenko is practicing that, but unfortunately I would say that still Belarus faces a lot of security issues in the modern world, and both inside and outside, and in order to be successful, definitely you should get people engaged, property rights, private property, free trade, entrepreneurship culture in general. That's what makes a modern country secure and stable. Otherwise you just have a lot of conferences, and it doesn't bring doesn't bring bread on the table, and it doesn't bring security to our homes and houses and households. Essentially, and as a outcome of that, as we argue many times, Belarusians are famous for being hutorianie, or people who escape from real problems in real life in internet, social security, isolated farmers, and some most initiative ones, most entrepreneurial ones, they leave the country for good. Vlad, thank you very much for your input, for your participation and knowledge and insights in the program Belarus Security in the Modern World. Listen, guys, if you like Beef for Belarus, please tell about that to your friends, everybody around, so that we cover the issue that you are most interested in. And we'll be happy to share our views. We do not claim that we are objective. Definitely we're subjective, and we tell the truth. We call a spade a spade. At the same time, we definitely don't want to dupe you, to cheat you, and to create some propaganda image of our country. But Belarus is a wonderful country to live, because Vlad and I will live here, and we don't want to leave, to live in prosperity, well-being, and security. Okay?
Yes, if you have questions, yes, you can, visit. I have a Facebook group, which there is a link on my website, expat.by, so just ask questions and we'll readily answer them, because this program goes mostly in Russian-speaking website, but there is a group.
Some people who speak English want to understand what's going on in our country.
I put the same programs on YouTube, so just you can ask there.
All right. Well. Enjoy your life, your plans, your dreams in secure and prosperous world. See you next time. Bye.
Goodbye.